up next, we have again something very excited that's coming up. We're diving into new challenges in software quality, that's brought by GenAI and LLMs with Federico Toledo, co-founder and chief quality officer at Abstracta. Federico has been shaping the software testing space for nearly 2 decades. With a PhD in computer science, he's not only built Abstracta into a global leader in quality engineering, but also founded amazing initiatives like Abstracta Academy, Aptum, and a social impact program, Nahual Uruguay, focused on making testing better and even more inclusive. And I think that's rare and beautiful. Hope He's also the host of Quality Sense podcast and conference, and also a first-time author for the first book, Spanish language book on software testing. I think that's again very, very awesome. Federico brings deep expertise and a thoughtful community-driven approach to everything he does in quality engineering. So, a little bit glance to now his talk. We have covered how amazing Federico is, right? So as companies explore the power of Gen AI and LLMs, most have been operating in safe spaces, more like experimental spaces, like proof of concept, sandboxing, and early trials. But as we move on to some real world deployments, the stakes are getting higher. So I think it's high time that needs to make sure it is very high on quality and needs to ensure that. In this session, Federico will unpack unique challenges that GenAI and LLMs introduce, from testing non-deterministic behavior to mitigating bias to tackling security and privacy concerns. He will also walk us through some testing approaches, automation strategies like eval, and how observability plays a big role in building confidence in AI-powered systems. So yeah, get ready to rethink what quality means in the age of AI. Over to you, Federico.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction. So this is what I want to talk today, the new challenges that Gen AI and LLMs brought to the software testing and software quality space. I don't know if that happened to you. It happened many times to me in the last couple of weeks that I join a meeting and there are more bots than people. And this is kind of the new reality, I think those kind of applications, that you just add a bot to a call and then you receive an email with the summary and the action items and all the transcription of the call. Those are the kind of tools that the aha moment, the wow factor is really fast, right? It's like, wow, this is amazing. It's really easy to have this type of information from my call. And the value proposition is that don't worry if you cannot make it to the call, you will receive an email with the summary and everything, right? Don't worry. But even though it's really easy to get the value and get excited, it's also easy after 2 minutes to say, hey, I didn't say that. This is not what we talk about. It's missing an important point. So you get disappointed very easily as well. And I think this is the type of reality that we are getting into. It's like, and this image represents what I want to say very easily. It's like with the Gen AI applications, assistants, and everything, it's really easy to get to an MVP, a prototype, or something working very fast, very, very fast. But it's getting more and more difficult to get to a point where we have more reliability, and even more difficult, 10x more difficult to get to a production ready application. And this is the type of things that I want to talk about today. So I'm not going to talk much about my introduction because they already presented me. Here you can download my book for free. 10 years ago, I wrote this book. If you speak Spanish, maybe you can get use of it. And also, I want to take the opportunity to invite you to come to Uruguay, to Montevideo, this November 11th, because we are organizing the fourth edition of our conference, Quality Sense, and also the Latin American edition of the prestigious workshop on performance and reliability that I'm also organizing here. So I prepared this talk in three different parts. First, I will talk a little bit about GenAI impacting software testing, then how to test GenAI applications, and I will finish with some closing thoughts. So it's fascinating to see how fast we are adopting AI assistants for development. According to this survey, last year, 63% of developers were already using some AI assistants, and 14% were considering to use it soon. But the question is that if we are really being more productive, because it seems that in the short term we are generating more code, and we are being faster at producing code. But according to this study, they realized that it was more duplicated code when you use GenAI assistants. And for the first time in those GitHub repositories, they noticed that for the first time, the copy pasted surpassed the moved code, meaning that there are more duplication instead of refactoring and modularizing, which give us a very bad consequence in the long term, which is poorer maintainability. And they also noticed that there were a 25 increase in the new code that needed to be adjusted before 1 month after they released that code, which is kind of worrying, right? There is another report, the DORA State of DevOps last year. I took this image from Stefan because I really liked how he summarized the report. And here we can see that also they say that the delivery of the performance of the delivery was reduced. We are producing more code in less time, which increases the average batch size. And we know that this increases the build and deploy complexity, which adds more probability to fail and makes it harder to resolve issues in production, right? But what's happening in software testing? Because if we have poorer quality of the code, means that we will have more back and forth between the different roles, not only with testing, but also developing developers and testing, and business analysts or infrastructure. And also faster code production means that we will have more accumulation in testing, which is going to be perceived as the bottleneck. And we already have been there. And we don't want to go back to this idea of testing is the bottleneck, right? Because we know what happens when these type of things start to happen. It's like they are probably will be seen as the ones against the innovation, or the ones that are slowing everything down, or probably they are going to decide to release without testing some features. So we don't know, we don't want to be there again. Also, something that I'm seeing is that in many cases, not all the time, but in many cases, the grown people are working in solving the testing problem. People that you can see that they hate testing, or that they don't understand the value, the real value of testing. Because what they are trying to do is to eliminate the human in the testing process. Here you have some examples of some tools that they were promising, like, okay, let's replace the human in the QA effort and change it for an AI assistant or AI agent. Some of them are already there, by the way. So our approach is to try to enhance, enrich the power of the testers, the human testers, in order to give them more tools to try to do more things. And I really encourage you to try to use some low-code or self-healing tool to make automation more robust and accessible to more people, or to use different copilots and assistants or GenAI-based applications in order to help you in your daily tasks as a tester, uh, but not only to be more productive as a tester, but also to understand the limitations of this type of tools, where they can be useful, which are the risks, which are the limitations of this type of tools, because this understanding will also help you to test this type of applications when you need to work with this. We in Abstract are working on our own tool for our testers in order to make them more productive, but also as an experiment, as a way to understand more about this type of technology and the limitations and risks and everything. So let's move to this other part of how, what are the new challenges that we have in testing when we are testing this type of GenAI based application. And let's start thinking of the simplest type of application using an LLM through its API. So basically, we have a system under test. That in some part of the code, it has some sort of template of a prompt that in runtime is filled with different values for the different variables that it has, and that prompt is invoked with an LLM. For me, a way to explain this is it's very similar to an SQL, where you have a template of an SQL, and you fill the different variables with values, the different variables with values that you have in runtime, and you invoke that SQL against the database management system. It's very similar in that sense. So imagine we have this type of system. We need to test this type of system. So let's think of the new challenges we have. And the first I want to bring here is the user expectations. I think they changed because, for example, I have a Google Assistant here at my home, and some time ago, I felt like in the future, right? That I was giving instructions to my Google Assistant, asking questions and information. Uh, but now, after ChatGPT appeared, I feel that they are kind of dumb, right? They cannot understand me because the user expectation changed, especially for any interaction with technology through natural language. Now I'm expecting more because ChatGPT made me think it can understand me much better. Also, the performance and the response times, perception change, because maybe before I thought that some model, machine learning, Gen AI, whatever technology, using thousands of parameters. If I ask a question, I receive a response in a minute was something okay. But now, ChatGPT or any other LLM makes me feel that the response is immediately, that I get the response immediately because it gives word by word or chunk by chunk, and I can read everything in a very fluent way. So that's a change in the expectation of the user that we need to manage in a similar way when we are developing our own applications. And something that for me is mind blowing is that we are training the users to be aware that they cannot trust in the output of the system. This is kind of very disruptive because before, if I was using a spreadsheet and I made a complex calculation or whatever, and I see a result, I trusted that if I made I did everything right, the result was okay because the calculation, the software was able to do the calculation. But now we are training the user to say, hey, this is your response, but you are responsible to check if this is correct or not. And this is a change in the paradigm in the way we interact with our users. It's really important for us also to understand how the models that we are using are trained and adjust. Not only trained, also they are adjust because they are trained with data that is biased, incorrect. There are a lot of hate, discrimination, many things. So people, the companies working on the models, they do some adjustments in order to avoid harm to their users because of this reality, right? And those adjustments also can introduce errors or unexpected, unwanted behaviors. And there is an example that got really famous that Gemini when it started to generate images, you could ask generate German soldiers, and it generated a very diverse group of people, which might be interesting for a Netflix show, but not for a history assignment, for example, right? So the question here is that as testers, our challenge here is to understand if the bias or if there is any bias or adjustment in the model that we are using, in the way we are using the model, that might affect any of our users in a negative way, right? There are also legal risks and concerns, especially, for example, we have the GDPR, we have the EU AI Act, that in these examples, if we have users accessing from Europe, we need to be compliant to those regulations. We need to be aware and test it properly. I really like this article from Michael Bolton and James Back. They basically analyzed different systematic behaviors they detected, they observed in the LLMs. Because typically people say the LLM can hallucinate, but they categorize different type of hallucinations. For example, in some cases, you interact with an LLM, you ask a question that is kind of ambiguous, and the LLM gives you an answer without asking for clarification. Or in other cases, it gives you an answer and you say, no, this is not correct. The correct answer is this other thing. And the LLM says, oh, okay, you're right, you're right. And this type of behaviors gives you, these categories, gives you an idea of a model on which situations could be interesting to test uh, your application when the LLM behaves in these different ways. I think it could be useful for this. As part of the quality strategy, I really find necessary to use test automation. And I will explain why. There are new versions of the model every other day, right? And those new versions include new features, include, I don't know, faster responses or cheaper cost. The cost per token is cheaper. So you will want to incorporate the new versions of the models in your application. But the thing is, maybe you crafted a prompt, you tested it with many data and everything, and you want to change the model, and the same prompt in the new version of the model, it will work very differently. So you need to test everything again. It's a dependency that you cannot control, so you need to test everything again. And that's why you need test automation in order to be flexible with these changes. But the challenge here is that automating tests for a non-deterministic output is really hard to um, make assertions in those outputs. So the alternative that we have here is something called evals. There are different alternatives, but evals from OpenAI is one example that I will use, which basically provides two different type of assertions. One is basic and the other one is advanced. The basic evaluation, the assertion, allows you to do some sort of basic string comparison in the output. You can execute the prompt with the data that you want to try, and then you can ask different questions to the response, like this string includes this other text, or is starts with this text, or something like that. But in most of the cases, this is very limited. But one second. But in most of the cases, we will need something more complex or advanced, like the model-graded eval templates, which basically uses another LLM to verify the output, where you can ask more semantic questions. For example, you can say, hey, this answer is similar to this other answer that I was expecting, or is this answer talking about this or that, or is it including this or that? So it doesn't matter how it's written, but you can check semantically if it's correct or not. So far, is a good alternative and very interesting approach that we have for this automation. So, so far we've been talking about the functional correctness, let's say. But what about the non-functional aspects? Because we could talk about different non-functional aspects like we can see here. And for security, I really recommend to read the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities for LLM-based applications, where the number one is the prompt injection. Very similar to SQL injection, but for prompts. In usability and accessibility, I think everything changes because we have a new way to interact between the user and the system. And this new type of interaction is based on natural language. So I think we need more research on how to make that communication, those messages, more accessible. And I haven't read anything related to that, and probably will need some help from philologists, right? User feedback is key in order to improve the way we how usable and easy to use are our systems. And in terms of performance, I will talk later about how observability and monitoring is key in order to make sure our systems work properly. So let's add some complexity to the system under test we are considering. Let's say that we are still under this idea of using an LLM through its API, but in this case, we will add the RAG approach, the RAG architecture. If you're not familiar with it, basically is to give the power of an LLM to your local database or knowledge base. Sorry. If you are not familiar with RAG, the retrieval augmented generation, basically is to give the power of an LLM to your local knowledge base. So basically the idea is to obtain the data from your files, your database, or whatever place you have your information, and clean that data, extract it, transform it, and divide it in different chunks, right? It could be by paragraph, by sentences, by words, and you vectorize that and store the vectors in a database, representing the semantics of the different chunks that you have. Once a user asks a question, you also vectorize the question, and you can find in the database, the vector database, which are the chunks that are close semantically to the question. So when you use the LLM, instead of sending the whole database, which will be very expensive, you only send the top 5, the closest 5 or 10 chunks that are more related to the query. In that way, you can get an answer more precise and in a less expensive way. In this type of architecture, you have different points where you can introduce errors, right? Because the way you obtain the data, the way you divide into chunks, the way you represent the vectors, the way you decide to take the top 5, the top 10, there are different things. What I want to convey, to mention here as an important part of our testing strategy should be to be aware how this architecture is configured, built, and how it works. We need to be really embedded, because if we test this type of systems as a black box, probably our testing will not be covering the important scenarios that we need to, to cover, okay? And if we think in something even more complex, we could think about autonomous agents. It's not only a user interacting with a system that interacts with an LLM, but it's a system that is autonomous, and there are different triggers that can make the system interact with an LLM and make decisions that maybe you don't see the response directly in the interface, right? So the main thing here is that we lost visibility. And also there is another important aspect to consider is that as we are interacting with something, with an LLM that is not completely reliable because we know it can fail, we need to understand that every other interaction we add to the same workflow, we are increasing the probability um, of failure of that flow. So we need not only to test the different components, the individual units, but also the whole the different workflows that we can have in the application. And for understanding the the workflows, we need to understand how they are designed, and also we need observability in order to be able to access to the different traces to understand how the systems interact with the LLM and with the different tools that allows the agent to invoke different actions. So this is why it's really important to have some observability. One example is Datadog, but there are different tools that allow you to have the logs of the application, the traces, and a lot of metrics that can help you understand how the system is working inside, right? And not treating it like a black box. So to wrap up the presentation, I also wanted to give you an anecdote, something I wanted to try myself. This this trend of the vibe code, I give Bolt a try, and as a tester, I wanted to build a testing tool to apply the pairwise method to combine different test data. And here you can see my prompt. I want to build a web app that can generate test data applying pairwise combinatorial methods. And after 1 or 2 minutes, I got this interface, this application working. And again, the wow factor was really fast. I said, wow, with this simple line, I could generate a functioning application that can help me do my testing. Perfect. So I started to use the pairwise test generator, and it was really hard for me to trust in the application because I tried with different variables and different values, and I said, okay, it looks like this is correct, but how can I make sure that this is correct? So I started to iterate, and I ended up with this version of the application where I have where I have something similar to the beginning here. I also asked to add some metrics in the output. So I wanted to compare how many tests were generated with the pairwise test generator and how many cases will have designed with each choice and with the Cartesian product. So I could compare the numbers. Here I have the generated test cases, and I also asked to generate a pair coverage matrix, which is basically to see the different pairs and in which test case this pair was covered. This allows me to understand if the output is correct or not. And I came up with this idea, I think, because I have the mindset of a tester. So I made the application easier to validate for the user, which I feel that this is very important in this new way of vibe coding and stuff. So for me, our mindset of testers, it's really important even for development, for this new type of development. And I want to close the presentation with quoting my associate and friend Fabian. He said that writing code and debugging and reviewing code is now a commodity, and testers and business analysts are now the key players in this new co-intelligence era where the human in the loop is critical. So thank you so much for the time, for the invitation to participate in the conference. And I hope we can connect in LinkedIn or any other social media and continue the conversation because I'm really passionate about these topics. And I think we need in the community to continue analyzing and interchanging information in order to get ready to test this new type of applications. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Federico. That was a lovely session. I think I found it very insightful, and I definitely agree. Irrespective of the AI era, humans still should be in the loop. I also really like how some of the slides, especially by doing the evals, you left a little link on the site to read more. I think that's very thoughtful. So thank you for your expertise and thank you for your time in sharing. So also, folks, remember the conversation doesn't end here, right? You can always join us at the BrowserStack Discord community and carry on these conversations with the fellow attendees, ask more follow-up questions, network, and grow further with us.